Welcome to the Crispy Ear podcast with Merseyside Women of the Year. And once again, we've got the most amazing guest, Lynne Akwei-Howe. Lynne, welcome. Thank you so much for coming to see us, and thank you for taking the time to come and have a chat.
And thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I wanted to catch up with you because obviously you were our social impact winner for 2024. So how's that been? What's been the MWOTY journey?
It's been absolutely amazing. It was fantastic because Sarah Lawton from Rice Framework gave that added bit of going, actually there's some funding which has paid for 100 sessions of counselling for some of the children and families. So that's been absolutely brilliant, and it's been lovely. Although reporting on those things when you're doing funding is always dull, it's always a lovely moment too, because it makes you actually just stop and actually catch. You get so caught up in the day-to-day of everything that when you write those reports, you actually stop and catch it and go, oh, that's what we've done. That's the outcome. That's the impact. And so being able to see some of that and pull that together and having that additional support. We were then also won the Silver Award for the Wirral Life Business Awards for health and wellbeing, and then we were nominated for the Downtown and Business Women Awards as well. We didn't win, but that was a lovely experience as well. And all of that has come off the back of the MWOTY journey, and then some amazing little collaborations with some of the other MWOTY nominees and winners. So that's been
we've got the WhatsApp group, haven't we? And that bit for me, sometimes it is quite
busy.
Yes, sometimes you do have to mute it, I have to say, so everybody knows. But sometimes what blows me away is the collaborations that go on, like you say, and also the fact that there is that opportunity to throw something in there if you are struggling, or if you want to have any advice. And
I think that's been the really lovely part of it, because I think there have been some moments in that group chat, particularly where people have kind of shared those personal moments, and actually it's that side, as kind of community managers, or whether you look at it as as business or whatever way you kind of consider that, it's that bit of going, sometimes who is it you go to for support?
Yeah.
Where are those spaces? And it can also feel like, oh yeah, there's a bunch of people and a standard business networking. You wouldn't necessarily want to share.
No.
Some of those elements, and that I think is the difference with MWOTY, is that with that group chat, etc., everyone's kind of got comfortable, and is comfortable to share, and it is incredibly supportive. So it's not just the event or the business side or what have you. It's that genuine support as individuals that also comes off the back of it, and then the friendships and relationships that then develop out of that.
I think some of the women that we've spoken to, obviously some of the finalists, have said, because not a scary thing, but because sort of like, we do push you out of your comfort zone, because sort of like, you've been nominated, and then sort of like, we get everybody together, and then it's like you don't know what you're coming to. So I think you have that common bond around, you've all been through the experience together. Now, it sounds terrible, doesn't it? It sounds like a really horrible experience, but everybody says, well, yeah, but at the end of it, this is what you end up with women that are there and will support you.
No, 100%. And I said it, even in the group, whether it's work, whether it's been personal, whether it's health issues or whatever it is that's been going on for all of us at different points. And yes, as you say, sometimes it's busier and people can't catch up, and then someone will go, oh, I'm just reading through everything, but it feels safe.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important element of going, actually, it doesn't feel like a competition.
No, it doesn't.
It does feel like a collaboration. It feels like you've got people who genuinely, what's that, all those silly memes, who want to raise each other crowns rather than trying to pull you down. And I think that is very different about MWOTY. It's not just, oh, here is the day it's done.
Yeah.
It's that ongoing relationship. And I think for us, that kind of just sits very much in terms of the way we tend to work anyway, that actually it kind of very much suits our ethos. And
It's nice for me to hear also that you've been recognised elsewhere, because, you know, we do say that it's a platform to be seen, to be heard and to be found. And I think any kind of recognition, especially the work that you do, Lynne, around families, and I don't want to speak for you, so just tell me a bit more about what you do at Creating Communities.
So Creating Community offer family education and mental health support. What does that look like? We've got assistant psychologists who work with clinical psych, and they do sort of the initial triages and some of that one-to-one work. We've got a family wellbeing team who do wraparound support. So we always giggle of going, they're the nanny McPhee. You know, here when you need them, but don't necessarily want them. Gone when you want them, but you don't need them. But they're there to kind of go, we know life is full of stresses, so let's alleviate some of those bits, which means that then you are able to deal with the things that your challenges that you're facing, whatever that might look like. And if it's not something we do, they'll introduce you to another organisation and broaden that support network for the families to go, actually, here are the other people that can do that. Then we have our psychosocial education, which is all around courses that look at adverse childhood experiences and what the impact of that and how we can mitigate. We've got a domestic abuse recovery program. We look at the Strengthening Families program, Strengthening Communities, which looks at your wider parenting, but also your community engagement, community involvement, children's mental health, managing stress. So there's a whole raft of mixture of the parenting side of things, etc., but also that psychosocial education of going, understand what has happened, and here are the things that you can do. And then the final sort of bit is what we refer to as a community embedding, which sort of is everything from family activities. In the summers we do forest school. HAF is on at the moment, so we've got a trip to Trentham Gardens, we've got an Easter egg hunt going on, afternoon tea, we have our weekly events as well that take place. So afternoon tea is one of the popular ones, but I think there's anything between 50 and 60 people attend now, so that's busy. We have peer support groups, but then we also do your qualifications and training, because we encourage the families to kind of go, hey, come and volunteer, because actually that's one part of building your confidence, being around people who already understand what's going on, but if you're dealing with whatever challenges, it's a good environment to be around. But then they join us, do their own upskilling, and whether that's some have moved into work with us. So I think last summer when we did the count up, 25% of the staff team had started as volunteers, and then they might move on to other roles, or whether they stay with us. So yeah.
I think also when people have been in those shoes and they are then able to understand where somebody's coming from, because I came to motherhood very late in life, and then I realised quite quickly that they don't come with a manual, do they?
No.
So yes, you know, to have that ability, or that if you are struggling, to have that place to be able to go to.
And most of us come with our own lived experience. I quite happily put my hand up to my 6 aces of going, but that doesn't necessarily define you. And you can take some of those challenges and turn them into strengths. Part of our funding through the Merseyside Violence Reduction Partnership meant that we've been able to provide therapy, and that was part of the additional funding that Rice Construction was able to offer through the MWOTY award. So it's kind of genuinely trying to go, okay, how can we allow people to make the changes they want? It is not about us deciding your life needs to look different. It's about families coming to us and going, actually, these are the things that we're dealing with. Here is the history. This is what makes it so hard. And let's look at how we move forward. So I think when we were looking at the stats, you know, roughly somewhere between 65 and 75% have experienced or disclosed some level of trauma, 25% alcohol and substance misuse, 50% have had some experience of domestic violence. And you kind of go, life is hard, you know, and people are genuinely doing their best. And then you throw children into the mix. And in essence, I sort of came to this because I ended up fostering 3 little people in my early 30s, and that was a shock.
It is a shock. I don't think anything prepares you for it, and especially, you know, in all fairness, other people's children, you know.
And they're very much my babies.
Yeah.
Youngest is still at home, and they're making their own way. But it is that thing of going, you know, I was talking to somebody else, I'm going, you have to accept that actually your life doesn't belong to you anymore.
No.
And that's a shocker,
Yeah,
you know, particularly if you're young, of going, hang on.
You have to change the selfish to the selfless.
Absolutely.
And I think, because, you know, me and my husband have been we were together for 25 years before we were presented. And it was just like, oh my goodness. You know, we had our own groove. We had, you know, we were selfish because...
You can be.
And then all of a sudden, you'd have to learn to be selfless. And that's the bit that sometimes you're a bit resentful of.
And it's hard and it's relentless. And
especially with 3.
Absolutely. But I mean, we've got families that, you know, have 6 little people. And some of them are not so little. We've got families that have got 10 little people.
Oh, right.
And you kind of go... This is hard work. On one of the courses, we talk about, you know, special time and try and find 10 minutes there. And one of the mums was gone, you know, that's kind of tough with 6. And it's like, absolutely, I'm not going to pretend to you that it's easy. And the thing I think with family life is that some of the things we need to do are simple. In terms of our mental health, some of the things we need to do are simple, but they are incredibly difficult. If that makes sense. I know that can sound like a bit of an oxymoron, but what you're required, it's like, okay, change the thinking, look at the positive. It's like, that's easier said than done, because actually I'm living in the mire of the daily challenge and the daily grind. And I know that, you know, when I had my little ones, I gave up work. I was a head of department of a school in London, and gave up work to look after the little people. And it's that whole sudden realisation of going, actually, you know, I hadn't realised up to that point how much of my life I'd defined by my work. I didn't realise the impact of people saying things like, oh, well, you don't really work, do you? Or you're not really a mum, are you? And what that would feel like. And then dealing with the challenges of 3 beautiful little people who had their own difficulties or whatever else, and how that was being expressed, along with the newness of what living looked like, you know, struggling with finances, etc. And then coming off the back of that, kind of going, actually, exactly as you say, there is no manual that comes with children.
This will happen on page 32.
And,
yes.
And everyone focuses on the kids and on the children. And one of the really interesting things, one of the programs, one of the very early sessions we did, and we just said to the mums, and how are you doing? And she burst into tears and she says, no one ever asks that. Yeah. Everyone, it's the kids. And it's like, that is really important. And absolutely, fundamentally, that is what we are there to do. But actually, what we know is that you need to keep the grown-ups around them supported too, because it's that old, you know, aeroplane oxygen mask thing.
It is.
Got to put your own oxygen mask on so that you can make sure that you're okay for those little people. And sometimes that's the hardest bit, particularly with mummies, to remind them of going, you're trying so hard, but actually if you break, who looks after?
Everybody goes down, don't they?
Absolutely. So do you know what? Take the time out to come to the peer support group. Take the time out. You're not being selfish. Actually, that's a really important part of staying sane. Come here and vent and rant and rave, so that you can go home and say, I miss you, little darling.
Well, that's it, isn't it? But also
And it
you can
gives
share
you...
with people that have had the same experiences as you, and I think that's why the services that you offer are so important, because you've actually got people that have had those lived experiences.
Absolutely, and between the staff, but also just the relationships that families struck up, then often we hear that from families going, I thought it was just me. I thought I was the only one. And you suddenly find yourself in a room with, 10, 12 people, realising that, we're all having the same sort of issues, whether that's from, no matter what end of the socioeconomic scale, no matter what end of the education scale. Had a couple of parents who I thought was lovely. One of them had been an assistant head teacher. one had been a mummy, since she was very young. And they both had this lovely conversation where one said to her, she said, I'd have thought you were stuck up, but actually you're the same as us. And she said, actually I would have been nervous and felt intimidated to talk to you, but actually we're going through the same issues, we're going through the same thing. And it's also recognising that commonality, it's the cohesion. We've got one of our groups that did the Strengthening Families course, and it's beautiful because the four of them still catch up. That was 2021, so we're in 2025. They still go out together at various points where things have been tough. They might have called and then somebody else from the group will say, that's fine, I'm going round. And so they've expanded that support network, and that hasn't involved us. And it's that real message of empowerment, of going, you can't write that.
No, But I think the work that you do as well, it's not about spoon feeding people. It's about giving them the opportunity, like you've just said, to be able then to move away and to be self-sufficient and to have those skills and something else in your tool bag that's
absolutely
help.
We don't officially close any families. What we do is we just put them on what we refer to as quarterlies. If going, it's a quarterly wellbeing check, that's fine, crack on. But someone will check in, and then eventually people will kind of go, actually, I'm good. It's fine. And it's just a message. But the flip side's also true, where sometimes you have people who are anxious because actually they've been through the system and they've had really negative experiences, who actually won't engage to start with. But you do those quarterly checks and then they go, hey, okay, so what is that? Because actually what they see is you're still there.
Yeah.
And it's having that option, I think, for the families of going, we can, if we want to. We can dip back in if we like. It's not a full new process, but no one's hounding you at the same time. And the courses are very much about going, you understand it because you know your life best and you are the one that can implement that best. All the stuff function from a coaching model rather than a teaching model. Of just going, actually, it really is about your empowerment. It really is about what changes you want in your life, because no one is going to make that change unless they actually want to do that. So it's how we're able to sort of put that scaffolding in around them so that they're free to build as high as they like.
But isn't that great? It must be a really proud moment for you to see that happen.
Absolutely. One of the parents said to me recently, she said, she was one that had come to us as a parent, volunteered, worked with us and has moved on and is loving the new job. And she said, but I couldn't have done it without you guys. You guys did that. And I said, we didn't do anything. We just walked with you. And she laughed and she said, you always say that. And I said, I do. But that's because it's true. Because if you didn't do the hard work, we provide the information, we provide the support. If you don't do the hard work, you don't get the benefits. And I think in some senses that's what MWOTY has also offered.
I think it's that confidence thing, isn't it? Because I think sometimes you can tell yourself, well, I think it's Henry Ford, if you tell yourself you can't, you're probably right. And I think that what you do for, especially the people that come in as a volunteer, and again, that must be really difficult for you because, training people up isn't cheap, and especially the level that you have to work at, because people, you can't just have you have to have qualifications and do things properly because you're dealing with people's lives. But it must be difficult for you then to go, okay, as much as you want to paint the smile on your face and you're made up that they're going, but they're going on to, a better...
No, absolutely. But it's genuinely that thing of going, we've always maintained that we're not trying to create a codependency. Yeah. And, my response to stuff whenever they need to move on is always, you need to do what is best for you. Yeah. And I maintain that of going, there is no job in this world that is more important than your health, whether that's physical or mental or your family. So you've got to do what's right for you, and that might not be, do you know what I mean? I'm not going to be sitting around saying, oh yes, I'm celebrating, but that is the only thing we can do. And it was, you know, for myself, I know that when I gave up to look after the little people, that was in essence the moment I was at, and people went, "Are you really doing that? You know, you're looking at a, you know, pastoral lead job, blah blah blah. You've got your head of year. Are you really going to give up work?" And it's like, but that is the only option. Because actually these little people need looking after, and what I realised very quickly, it's like, actually I can't do full-time teaching and 3 little people that had all of their challenges. Actually I'm not doing anybody, you know,
because money guilt is a real thing.
Absolutely.
It really is. I mean, you know, and I truly don't think, and if somebody tells you you can have it all, that is a big fat lie, because it really is. It, you know, been there, done that, and you know, you just turn yourself into a pretzel, and something has to give. Absolutely,
and it is that bit. I tried to go back to work, so I had a few years where I didn't work. Tried to go back part time. That wasn't so bad, but exactly that. Still felt like I was doing everything terribly. Yeah. It's like I don't feel like I'm working enough. Don't feel like, you know, I'm doing home well enough. Tried to go back full time. That really didn't work, and then had to come to the conclusion that actually no, I need to do what's right for me, and that meant stopping everything and just going, okay, focus on the family for a second, and then we'll take from there. But it was the right decision, because that's where creating community came out of.
It was meant to be, wasn't it? Meant to be, because sometimes I think also when things are presented to you that can seem quite left of field and probably not right at that time. My husband always says that, you know, he doesn't believe in it, but I always say the universe sends you things, whether, as long as it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. You know, so for me, how many families would not have benefited from what you do, Lynne, if you hadn't have made that decision?
Yes, I suppose I haven't quite thought of it in quite categorically.
It's best not to analyse it.
But yeah.
Now, what would I be doing?
Yeah.
But one of the things that we've made a part of the podcast is around the 4 foundations that I say, which is network, information, money, and self-belief. Okay. So out of those 4 things, over your career and what you do now, which of those 4 things, it doesn't just have to be one, would you say that has been most valuable?
So most valuable, I'd say to you, it's the networking, in terms of value of going. It was when I first moved up to the Wirral, not knowing anyone, and I ran around every community meeting and event, and it was the people that I got to know. It's the opportunities that have come out since the MWOTY awards. So I'd say in terms of value, it was the people who came on board and believed when there was nothing to believe in, when we were running around all volunteering before there was funding or anything else. So definitely networks in terms of value. On the personal level, I'd say it's the self-belief. It's the slight cross between the imposter syndrome of going, can I? And the madness of going, absolutely. Why not? We can only give it a go. What's the worst that can happen? And I think sometimes that's self-belief can kind of feel like you must think that you're absolutely going to make it. Whereas sometimes I think self-belief is more the acceptance of going, hey, I'll give it a shot. And it's fine. We'll see where it ends up. But it's the not being afraid to try or not being afraid to fail or to make that mistake, which can be quite daunting.
I think it's very brave to fail.
Yes, exactly.
And I think, and especially sort of like, there's so much put that and a negative that failure is, but that's, I've found over my many years now, probably too many years, that's where all the juicy bits are. Because when you fail, that's the bit that makes you stronger.
Bingo. And that's where you've got to get creative and adapt, innovate, and then push forward. So that, so I'd say those would be, of those 4, those would be the 2 that I'd go have been, for me, the most valuable.
Yeah, because I think it is a bit of a weird framework, and people have said, you know, why those 4 things, but that's what I've found over the years, that it's a bit like a 3-legged stool. If you've got one of them missing, it's always a bit wobbly. Or sometimes if you've got 2 of them missing, well, you can't sit on a 2-legged stool, can you? but things are just a bit too unstable.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, especially around looking at the different areas that then you can sort, where do we need to go and get help and assistance from?
Yeah.
But also looking at the future for creating communities, what does that look like?
So for us, it's just sort of stabilising that funding in terms of the support that we offer families. What we're really looking at is the very principle of it has been trying to get people and organisations to kind of understand the impact of adverse child experiences. Everybody in the workforce is bringing whatever their own ACEs are.
Yeah.
And that has a flavour, shall we say, to how they'll interact and how they work. So it's really important from that side. So we're really looking at kind of developing that work on the sort of private sector side, the commercial side, rather than the community side. Absolutely, because even in terms of how we manage our teams, or looking at what are those things that come back into the workplace, because people aren't, you know, black and white. They can't leave their personal stuff at the door.
No.
It has an impact. So how do we sort of look and understand that and recognise that?
And is that going into, is that doing face-to-face? Is that doing online?
So
what does that look like for a business?
So it'll be a mixture of, so at the moment we're speaking to an organisation who we're offering lunch and learn webinars. We're doing the ACEs awareness. We're talking about doing sessions around managing stress, developing wellbeing and resilience, children's mental health, that sort of element as part of their...
So, sorry, the ACEs are...
Adverse childhood experiences awareness.
And what would that look like? So I'm just sort of trying to, because obviously this is going to go out to people, and obviously from a corporate perspective, if then how could that manifest? What would a childhood?
So adverse childhood experiences are broadly 10 categories. You look at maltreatment, so children that have grown up with any kind of abuse, whether that's physical, emotional, sexual, financial abuse, coercive controlling behaviours, bullying. It might be having to really take on those adult responsibilities. So the child that absolutely, whether they're a carer or whether mum and dad are just working, so you're left looking after the younger children. It's dealing with a parent with a mental health issue, because actually if you're very little, you know, not through any fault of their own, they're not emotionally available. It's how our neurology literally is wired then. So then as we grow up, it's some of those things that we all talk about and might be flippant about sometimes, of going, actually, it's the people pleaser. Well, why are they a people pleaser? Because actually, do you know what? Life was tense at home, and what I learned as a very little person was that if I just tried to make everybody happy, it was safe. Things were better. When we look at some of those negative behaviours, it's actually, this was what I needed to do when I was in those situations to survive. So we see those things come out in terms of character traits and personalities as we turn into adults. So it's how that then impacts in terms of, you know, all of us as individuals, whether that's in the workplace or otherwise.
Because that could have a big impact on team cohesion.
Absolutely.
And especially sort of like, you know, when you're trying to get a team together, because it doesn't do for everybody to be the same. But if you've got an ability then to help somebody that probably maybe doesn't recognise that, you know, an ACE is a thing for them, you would sometimes maybe not know.
Absolutely. And it's also kind of... we had a scenario at one point where someone said, oh, such and such said something and they behaved like this, and the question was, do they normally? And I went, no. So it's like, okay, so let's think about what we do. It's that understanding what those stresses are, understanding what those triggers might be, of going, okay, now consider what may be going on. So the individual went, oh, yeah, got it, because that's what we do. We spend all of our time talking to families that sometimes we forget that actually applies to us too.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And as an organisation, I said, we all come with our own lived experience, which can make that challenging. So I'm not going to pretend to you that we've got that sussed by any stretch of the imagination, but it's the awareness. It's having those conversations. It's people actually thinking about how do you put that into place, or if you're considering your staff wellbeing, how do you take that into consideration to understand what they might be dealing with, or give them the understanding so that actually if they are able to relieve that or put that down as a stressor, it means they're not so worried about what's going on at home because they found new coping strategies to deal with that, which means that then they can focus more on whatever else is going on and they're at work. So we're speaking to a few organisations. We do the mental health first aid, so we work with one of the hotel chains delivering all the mental health first aid for all their staff so that they're all mental health first aiders. So it's looking at how we can structure some of that side of things.
Well, sometimes that's the other side of it, isn't it? Because looking for grant funding is fine, but then you do have to have that certain commercial element that doesn't really it takes a lot of time to go and find it, but applying for grants and stuff doesn't make you self-sustainable, does it?
No, absolutely. And it's looking for, remembering that as community organisations, as not-for-profit organisations, at the end of the day, it's got to be commercially viable because it's got to be sustainable. And that's the element that can be quite challenging. I think I read an article saying that last year there was £1 billion taken out of the funding for charity sector. And that was just in 2024. So we know that everyone's feeling that. And it's, you look at organisations of going, actually, it's the ones that are able to kind of step out and innovate and look at going, where is that sustainability? So that we can still be here in another 50 years' time.
Doing the amazing work that you do, because it is fabulous what you do, Lynne. It really is. I mean, I think there would be lots of families and lots of people that would probably be in not a very good place had you not had your own self-belief and decided to do what you want, what you thought needed to be done. So if you could go back and speak to yourself, and obviously this is called the Crispy Ear podcast, what would you give yourself a crispy ear about?
I think I'd remind my teenage self that there's no rush. When I sort of sat and reflected on that question, it's just like I felt in such a hurry when I was young.
Yeah. And you think you're invincible, don't you?
Well, I think I was a bit twisted because I thought I was invincible, but I had no concept of the fact that I would live long. Oh. So I kind of, I genuinely remember being about 15 and thinking, 50, never going to make it. Do you know what I mean? Never going to make it. That's really old. Yeah, it is, isn't it? I remember so that I felt like there was a real rush. And actually I'm 50 in a couple of weeks time. And I'm suddenly going, there's a lot of time. There's a lot of time. And so, I think that's what I'd kind of remind my younger self of going, there's no rush. You don't have to put the pressure on yourself to do everything so quickly. You don't have to, rush into decisions because you're feeling this must do now.
Oh, right. That's a really interesting answer because also it's that being young, you wouldn't have thought that you would feel sort of like, the rush to do it. So I sort of get where you're coming from to sort of say, actually, do you know what, just cool the jets. Cool the jets.
Take your time.
Just take your time.
Breathe, it'll be fine. Just sit with it.
Lynne, thank you so much. You're absolutely an inspiration. And I'm honestly, and I know I say this every single time, I do feel very, very privileged because having women like yourself that are part of MWOTY and that are part of this podcast, for me, I've never done this before and it doesn't feel, I just feel like it's a really lovely way to find out more about you, but then also the impact that you have on other people. And also for me, I feel very honoured that you give up your time and come and speak to me and to us and let people know what it is you do in more depth.
And we will be ever grateful.
Oh, no, thank you so much, Lynne. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been Ellie Kerr, the Crispy Ear podcast, and thank you very much for listening. Thank you. Bye.